The Biography of Niccolo Machiavelli. Practically nothing is known of Machiavelli before he became a minor official in the Florentine government. His youth, however, was passed during some of the most tumultuous years in the history of Florence. He was born the year that Lorenzo the Magnificent came to power, subverting the traditional civil liberty of Florence while inaugurating a reign of unrivaled luxury and of great brilliance for the arts. He was 25 at the time of Savonarola's attempt to establish a theocratic democracy, although, from the available evidence, he himself took no part in it. Yet, through his family, he was closer to these events than many Florentine citizens. The Machiavellis, for generations, had held public office, and his father was a jurist and a minor official. Machiavelli himself, shortly after the execution of Savonarola, became secretary of the Second Chancery, which was to make him widely known among his contemporaries as the Florentine secretary. By virtue of his position, Machiavelli served the 10 liberty of peace, who sent their own ambassadors to foreign powers, transacted business with the cities of the Florentine domain, and controlled the military establishment of Florence. During the 14 years he held office, Machiavelli was placed in charge of the diplomatic correspondence of his bureau, served as Florentine representative on nearly 30 foreign missions, and attempted to organize a citizen militia to replace the missionary troops. In his diplomatic capacity, which absorbed most of his energies, he dealt for the most part with the various principalities into which Italy was divided. His more important missions, however, gave him an insight into the politics of Europe as well as of Italy. In 1500, he was sent to the court of the King of France, where he met the mightiest minister in Europe, Cardinal d'Amboise. On this occasion, he began the observation and analysis of national political forces, which were to find expression in his diplomatic reports. For example, his report on France was written after he had completed 3 assignments for his office in that country. The report on Germany was prepared as a result of a mission to the court of Emperor Maximilian. The most important mission, in view of his later development as a political writer, was that in 1502 to the camp of Caesar Borgia, Duke Valentino. Under the aegis of his father, Pope Alexander VI, Caesar was engaged in consolidating the Papal States, and Machiavelli was in attendance upon him at the time of his greatest triumph. Machiavelli had several audiences with Caesar and witnessed the intrigues culminating in the murder of his disaffected captains, which he carefully described in the method adopted by Duke Valentino to murder Vitellozzo Vitelli. As the Florentine secretary, he was also present a few months later at Rome, when Caesar came to ruin and disgrace upon the death of Alexander VI. During his diplomatic career, Machiavelli enjoyed one outstanding success. Largely through his efforts, Florence obtained the surrender of Pisa, which had revolted from Florentine rule and maintained its independence for years. Although he did not achieve any other diplomatic triumphs, he was esteemed for the excellence of his reports and is known to have had the confidence of the president of Florence, the Gonfaloniere Piero Soderini. But with the restoration of the Medici into power in 1512, Machiavelli's public career came abruptly to an end. His efforts to ingratiate himself with the new masters proved ineffectual. Looked upon with disfavor as the ex-Gonfalonier's man, he was deprived of his office and exiled from the city for a year. He then fell under suspicion, although unjustly, of being implicated in a conspiracy against the new government. He was imprisoned and tortured on the rack, and was released only when Giovanni de' Medici became pope. On release from his dungeon, Machiavelli, with his wife and children, retired to a small farm not far from Florence. Dividing his time between farming and petty dispensations, he lamented that, possessing nothing but knowledge of the state, he had no occasion for using it. The only remaining link with the official world was his friend, the Florentine ambassador to the Pope, whom he wrote of public affairs and of his private amorous adventures. His letters reveal, however, that he had a life by night in his study. At the threshold, he wrote, I take off my workday clothes, filled with dust and mud, and don royal and currial garments. Worthily dressed, I enter into the ancient courts of the men of antiquity, where, warmly received, I feed on that which is my only food, and which was meant for me. I am not ashamed to speak with them and ask them the reasons for their actions, and they, because of their humanity, answer me. 4 hours can pass, and I feel no weariness. My troubles forgotten, I neither fear poverty nor dread death. I give myself over entirely to them. And since Dante says that there can be no science without retaining what has been understood, I have noted down the chief things in their conversation. Machiavelli conversed mostly with Livy, Aristotle, and Polybius, and composed his principal works upon politics, that is, the discourses upon the first decade of Livy and the Prince in 1513. He intrigued to bring his work to the attention of the Medici rulers. He did not succeed in this, however, until he turned from politics to drama. The comedies he wrote during these years of retirement were acclaimed by the Florentine gentility. The Mandragola was so successful that it was performed before Pope Leo X in 1520. Largely because of the fame he had acquired as a writer, Machiavelli was asked by the Medici rulers to give advice on the government of Florence. He used the occasion to restate and defend Republican principles in his Discourse on Reforming the State of Florence. He was also commissioned to write a history of the city and produced his Florentine history. However, it was not until the last years of his life that he was recalled to an active role in public work. He was appointed by Pope Clement VII to organize a national militia, such as he had defended in his Art of War. But he received little help from the men with whom he had to work, and his efforts came to nothing when the troops of Emperor Charles V sacked Rome and put an end to all of Clement's plans. Shortly before Machiavelli's death, the Republic was re-established in Florence. Although he had never been able to regain public office in Florence under the Medicis, he still seemed too close to them to be acceptable to the new Republican government. His request to be reinstalled in his old position as Florentine secretary was refused. Machiavelli died a few days later on June 20th, 1517.